and welcome to our UNISA libraries. It's the UNISA Library and Information Services webinar, where we celebrate the International Open Access Week with the theme Community over Commercialization. My name is Tulishandu Petla, and I'd like to greet and thank the organizers of this webinar, and also greet all the dignitaries and all the VIPs, including you, everyone in this place. And I stand 150. What do these years, what do these numbers have in common? No, they are not the lottery numbers. So, but the way I call them, they sound like lottery numbers. 15, 77, 150. Let me give you a moment. Anyone? Well, today we will celebrate 15 years of UNISA's institutional repository. We will celebrate 77 years of the UNISA library, and we will celebrate 150 years of the existence of UNISA. I thought I would see hands clapping and so on. So to help us celebrate and to kick off this day's program, I'd like to invite Dr. Ndeta to the fore. Please, Dr. Ndeta, ascend the virtual podium and help us to celebrate 15, 77, and 150. Over to you, Dr. Ndeta.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear UNISA. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear UNISA. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear UNISA. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear UNISA. Happy birthday to you.
Woo! That was absolutely fantastic, fantabulous. Move over, Luciano Pavarotti. May your soul rest in peace. Thank you so much, Dr. Ndeta. That was beautiful. That melody, it just brings that celebration to all that we are celebrating. Can we get a whoop whoop, a hip hip? Hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Congratulations, UNISA. Congratulations, UNISA Library. Congratulations, UNISA Libraries Institutional Repository. What a great start to the webinar indeed. We celebrate with UNISA. We celebrate as Unisans. Thank you so much, Dr. Ndeta. That was beautiful indeed. Hip, hip, hooray. As the I'm at the Department of English Studies under the School of Arts, and we recently had the School of Arts conference where we were celebrating Indigenous languages. So as you send congratulatory messages to UNISA, to the library, to the institutional repository, why don't you just take it up a notch and send your congratulatory messages in your Indigenous languages? So Afrikaans, isiZulu, isiNdebele, Xitsonga, Tshivenda, Swati, Portuguese, and so on. Go ahead and congratulate UNISA in your Indigenous languages. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming back to the program now, where we are hosting this webinar, and the theme, we're actually commemorating and we are celebrating International Open Access Week. That's what we are doing, and we are also aligning ourselves with the Global Media and Information Week. And so this webinar, it is celebrating under the theme of community over commercialization. When I got the program, I was reminded a few years ago, I read something about the 2002 Budapest Open Access Movement. Of course, silly me, I thought, access, they must be talking about just education. But then we're not talking about access to education per se. We're looking at open access to knowledge. And so that is big, that is broad, that is huge, where we're actually looking at opening access to knowledge. I am not the speaker for today, I'm just assisting to drive the program, but let us allow our very own Professor M. Mwepe to kickstart the program. Prof. Mwepe will give us the opening address, and as the Executive Director, Library and Information Services at UNISA. You do know that Prof. Mwepe, before he moved to the library, he was my school director. So I'm very, very happy to see you, my former director. Over to you, Prof. Mwepe.
Thank you, Madam Program Director, Dr. Tulisile Shandupetla, and good morning, colleagues, cousins, ladies and gentlemen. I have just switched on my camera so that you can see you are not addressed by a robot that is powered by the artificial intelligence. The funny thing with the technology is that when you want to access programs and applications, the computer will ask you to select squares with traffic lights, rivers, or both to prove that you are not a robot. I'm just sitting here quietly thinking, who is the robot between me and the computer? Ladies and gentlemen, in observing protocols, I would like to acknowledge in absentia both the Chancellor of the University of South Africa, His Excellency President Thabo Mbeki, and the Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Puleng Ngabula. I have been requested, or rather instructed by the organizers of this event to welcome all those who are attending this webinar on the virtual space of UNISA, as well as setting the tone for the program. Madam Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. You know, when you are driving, especially in Pretoria East, one should always observe potholes, otherwise the car will get a puncture. The danger with potholes is that when driving south, they are on your side of the road, and when you drive back north, it feels as if they had moved to the other side of the road. You can't avoid them. Hence, I am observing all the protocols. Ladies and gentlemen, the organizing committee under the leadership of one of our library divas, yes, library divas, Ms. Dudungosi, told me that the speakers for this webinar, including myself, are pregnant with information on open access, of course. I hope by the end of the program, you will all be well fed with the information regarding open access, and you will not ask how open is open access. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm both humbled and elevated by the honor and privilege to welcome you, set the tone, and contextualize the webinar. I am told that in the beginning, after books were written, bookshops were created, and they were good, but they came at a terrible price to buy books. And as we moved from Genesis to Exodus, librarians created open access, and it was better, plus it was free. Indeed, libraries are by design organically open access. For example, libraries build collections to be accessed by patrons free of charge as long as the patrons are affiliated to that particular library, with whether it is academic, special, or public library. This shows that open access has always been there in conventional libraries, although not so widely open due to space and place, as the books have to be physically accessed. And open access is a set of guidelines and procedures that allows for the free online distribution of research findings without any restriction on access and, of course, copylefted. It is about guaranteeing not only the accessibility of scientific information, but also the inclusiveness, equitable, and sustainable nature of its production. Hence, we are saying community over commercialization. And in open access environment, we talk of copylefting the information we access freely as opposed to copywriting it. And copylefting, of course, is founded on the concept of copyright, without which it would be impossible to exist. Just like as the stories can be told and retold in different settings by different crowds, open access also means that information can be accessed by anyone as long as they are connected to the Internet of Things. And in this regard, the product is made free in the sense that it is uncopyrighted and thus copylefted during the process. And with the disruptive and metaverse technologies, open access is becoming more and more open. I just don't know how open is open access. And this year, the world is celebrating Open Access Week from 23rd to the 29th October with the theme Community Over Commercialization. And we have just been told by the program director that UNISA Institutional Repository, which facilitated access for open access, is also celebrating 15 years. And UNISA Library and Information Services is celebrating 77 years. And of course, UNISA, the mother institution, is celebrating 150 years. So I'm saying that may the next 15 years of our UIR, and then the next 77 years of the UNISA library, and the next 150 years of UNISA be without a turbulence, wherein we can reach 40,000 feet and cruise until the cabin crew prepare us for landing. And here at the UNISA virtual platform, we are also celebrating Open Access Week today under the same theme. And the theme attempts to stimulate discourse on the methods to open scholarship that put the needs of the academic community and the public ahead of the commercialization of knowledge production. And as open access proponents, the time is now for us to educate and tell the people and the whole nation and the world about open access. And in African and South African context, in particular, open access bridges the gap of universities and research institutions as ivory towers. In South Africa, for example, most of the universities are built on the top of mountains, and students have to ascend the mountain in search of knowledge. Think of the University of Cape Town, Tshwane University of Technology, University of Limpopo, University of Mpumalanga, just to mention a few, which are built on the mountains. Of course, how can I forget the University of the Land, which is built on the top of Magelneck Hill? As accessing knowledge from these ivory towers is often a challenge, literally, both literally and figuratively. Literally, when the student have to ascend the mountain to go to the library or the classes, and figuratively through lack of access due to data, load shedding, heavy prices of books and journals. Sometimes researchers are even unable to access their own work as they have to buy it. As I introduce the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not concluding, I'm just introducing the conclusion. Even though we are in the global periphery, in South Africa, we are lucky to be in the hub of that periphery, as there is a periphery in every hub and a hub in every periphery. We acknowledge the presence of our Vice Principal, Research, Postgraduate Studies, Innovation and Commercialization, Professor Tenjue Meiwa, who is going to give us the message of support. And in order to ensure that knowledge production by South African university-affiliated researchers is visible and accessible, University Library Directors through SANLIC, or South African National Library and Information Consortium, developed negotiation principles for a transformational transition to open access. And these are legal agreements between libraries and commercial publishers that to enable institutions and funders to cover open access publishing costs. So with open access, it is often difficult for novice researchers in the global periphery to publish their work in prestige journals in the global hub, with editors citing scopes and audience as a hindrance. But with open access, this should not be the case, as the content once published can be accessed by anyone with internet access. So to unpack the issue, we have invited Ms. Lynn Samara from Springer Nature to give us the perspective of the publisher on open access, and we welcome her. We are no longer in times when a library user will visit the library and request a book, for example, on suicide. In those days, a librarian will refuse to issue the book on suicide, as there is no guarantee that the book will be returned. Now we are in the times when people can access libraries from anywhere in the world, as long as they are connected, and that is open access. It represents a new method to the scientific process based on cooperative work and new ways of diffusing knowledge by using digital technologies and collaborative tools. For the keynote speaker to address these issues, we are welcoming Dr. Nokuthula Mchunu from the National Research Foundation. Therefore, addressing the issue of open access through deliberations, academic gymnastics, and presentations during a webinar like this one will help to parachute, elevate, and propel the research output to new heights and uncharted territories to be visible and accessed by all. And Professor Mahanu will share her experience. In a conclusion, before conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, where I come from, they say, as the program director is saying, in my mother tongue, they say, Moyeng adutaletso aji samuli. And when they say that, we respond by saying that we will make sure that Moyeng abone kgwedi, because Moyeng o nna ka dimaripa gore shao la Moyeng le bewe ke mongae le rena re tseba gore Moyeng e tla ka ga e rile ka wena. Ye ke polelo ya mma o ka se ikwishishe e palela le baboledi ba yona. So I will ask Teams to translate, but I see even the Teams platform is struggling to translate, and it will be lost in translation. I would like to end this welcome address with a story of a young monk who went to the monastery, and upon arrival, he was assigned to copy copies of original manuscript by hand. He realized that if the mistake was made on the first copy, that mistake would continue with the subsequent copies. He alerted the abbot, the head monk, and the head monk said, "You are making a point, son, but we have been doing this for a long time." But after a while, the head monk went to the cellar, the basement, where the original manuscripts were kept. He went for an hour without coming back. The other monks were worried and decided to go looking for him in the cell. They found him sobering, crying with the tears coming from the eyes and leaning against the old manuscript. "What is wrong?" they asked. "The word is celebrate, not celebrate," replied the head monk. "This is now the new role of library, to authenticate information that is made open from multiverse and disruptive technologies as cloud storage, blockchain technology, Internet of Things, and cloud storage. You cannot be left behind. Neither should we look back to avoid turning into a pillar of salt and start asking questions such as, if you store data in the cloud, won't it be getting wet when it rains? And as the university libraries in South Africa are celebrating Open Access Week, we urge others to also invite us, and we will attend and pay revenge. It is hoped that in the long term, open would not be necessary in open science, as science will be open by default and would simply named science. This will enable knowledge produced by universities in the country to be visible and accessible even to the public. We yearn for the library of the future that can be accessed openly by anyone, irrespective of affiliation. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I must say you are welcomed and feel free to deliberate on the UNISA virtual space. And if you are not inspired at the end of this webinar, then you will expire. I thank you, Program Director.
Thank you so much, Prof. Mwepe. And I do hope by the end of this webinar, we will be inspired and not expired. And I am challenged as an editor that I do not find myself telling people to be celibate when they should be celebrating. Thank you very much, Prof. Mwepe. And now that we've been welcomed and we are now free and we stand on the protocols already presented, ladies and gentlemen, the program has started as we celebrate International Open Access Week. Now, I'd like to invite to the fore, Professor Tenjiwe Meiwa, and who is who is in the executive management of the University of South Africa. Prof. Meiwa is the Vice Principal for Research, Postgraduate Studies, Innovation, and Commercialization. It's important that we highlight and emphasize commercialization in light of the theme of the day and the theme of the week and the theme of this year's International Open Access Week. Prof. Meiwa, I cannot wait to listen to your talk because I am curious and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on today's theme. I will not waste time, but I will invite Prof. Meiwa to ascend the virtual platform to give us her talk. Over to you, Prof. Meiwa.
From the desk of our Chancellor, His Excellency Dr. Thabo Mbeki, and Professor Puleng Linkebula, the Vice Chancellor of UNISA, I bring you warm greetings. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on all platforms. I acknowledge Professor Mpho Ngwebe, who's the Executive Director of the Library and Information Services at UNISA. Also acknowledge Professor Mahano, who's the Executive Director of TNL Unit at UNISA, as well as with appreciation acknowledge Lynn Samara of Spring Nature. I also acknowledge with extended appreciation our guest speaker, Dr. Nokuthula Mchunu. She's a manager at the NRF. Welcome to the UNISA 2023 Open Access event. This event could not have happened at a better time than this year, 2023. UNISA celebrates 150 years in its service of humanity, and the theme for the Open Access 2023 is Community over Commercialization. It underscores a critical shift in perspective as it reminds us that knowledge is a political good, and its values also lies not only in its potential for profit, but in its capacity to uplift and empower individuals and communities. Education has always been a beacon of progress, that is higher education, and also it has been for enlightenment and personal development. Higher education empowers individuals to broaden their horizon, acquire specialized skills, and contribute and continue to do so to society's advancement. However, the landscape of higher education is rapidly evolving, you will concur with me, colleagues, and one of the most significant transformations is the concept of open access. It is always an honor for me to address a gathering recognizing and emphasizing the importance of embracing openness, collaboration, and the shared pursuit of knowledge. We come together today to acknowledge and celebrate the spirits of inclusivity, cooperation, and the collective benefit of open access to our global community. Through open access, we prioritize community over commercialization. We foster an environment that encourages the exchange of ideas. We also promote interdisciplinary collaboration in research and innovation and support the development of solutions to society's most pressing challenges. Open access empowers researchers, educators, and learners across the globe as it transcends geographical and socio-economic barriers and does so to actively participate in creating and disseminating knowledge. We stand a distinguished guest at a crucial juncture in our collective pursuit of knowledge. The challenges that we face as a global community relate to climate change, public health, social justice, or technology advancement, just to mention a few. And all these require collaboration and cooperation more than ever before. Therefore, by placing the community at the forefront, we acknowledge the power of shared resources, collective intelligence, and diverse perspectives in addressing these challenges head-on. Open access in higher education thus signifies the removal of the barriers that limit access to knowledge, to research, and educational resources. It is about democratizing education and ensuring that the benefits of learning and research are available to everyone, regardless of their geographical location, socio-economic background, or institutional affiliation. Hence today, august patrons of this seminar, I would like to emphasize the critical importance of open access in our higher education sector. We gather here today with us being called upon to remember that open access is not just a concept, but a powerful force for positive change in higher education. It is a means to bridge educational gaps that exist, to promote collaboration, to drive innovation, and it empowers individuals to become lifelong learners and active contributors to our global knowledge ecosystem. And this, of course, from a historical point of view, it is characterized by the pursuit of knowledge, innovation, and scholarly excellence. However, this pursuit often is faced with significant obstacles, such as restricted access to academic journals, costly textbooks, and limited availability of research materials. It is in this context that the concept of open access has emerged as a game changer. Now, on bridging educational disparities, open access initiatives in higher education are instrumental in bridging educational disparities. A seminal study by John Horton and his colleagues done in 2013, titled Open Access and the Transformation of the Scholarly Journal Landscape, highlights how open access can substantially reduce the financial burden on students and institutions. This, in turn, he argues, promotes inclusivity, ensures that education is accessible to individuals from diverse socio-economic backgrounds. And I believe that this seminar has those intents. Enhancing research, collaboration, and innovation is amongst the elements that we want to look at. The importance of open access in fostering research collaboration and innovation cannot be overemphasized. And this is testament to a study by Matthew Harvey and his colleagues done in 2015, which actually looked at and revealed that open access publications are more likely to open avenues of knowledge as well as to be cited and shared among researchers and students much more than we've seen before. The increased visibility and accessibility of research findings facilitates cross-disciplinary collaborations as it accelerates the pace of innovation. And lastly, on advancing global research initiatives, open access also plays a pivotal role in advancing global research initiatives. And this is, of course, experienced and seen in one of the latest publications by the European Commission, the 2021, entitled Open Science, Challenges, Opportunities, and Benefits. It emphasizes this publication, that is, how open access to research outputs and data fosters international collaboration, cooperation, thereby addressing pressing global challenges, part of which I've mentioned earlier, such as climate change. And indeed, with strengthening transparency and accountability, we see that being a fundamental principle in academia. Open access, therefore, aligns with these principles by promoting the sharing of research data as well as methodologies. And we cannot be appreciative enough of all this kind of work. And this certainly ensures that there's reproductivity as well as credibility in our scientific research, thereby enhancing the quality and excellence of higher education. We therefore, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, gather here today. We have to remember that open access is not just merely a concept, but a transformative force that empowers individuals and, indeed, having to repeat this, fosters collaboration and promotes more innovation. It aligns with broader goals of transparency, inclusivity, and excellence in academia. I therefore urge each and every one of us being patrons of this event today to actively support and engage in open access initiatives and ensure that we draw inspiration from these academic references that underscore its profound impact. Together, we can forge a future in higher education that is more equitable, more collaborative, and more impactful. Together, we can build a more inclusive, transparent, and impactful higher education sector that benefits us all as we all draw attention. Indeed, let us embark on this journey towards a more open, a more accessible higher education landscape guided by the insight of scholarly research. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Siyabonga kakhulu, Prof. Meyiwa. A round of applause for Professor Thenjiwe Meyiwa, ladies and gentlemen. As we continue with the program, I just want to reflect on UNISA's principles. UNISA is an ODEL. I know that at UNISA we are ODEL and now we are CODEL. But according to international nomenclature, we are still ODL, Open Distance Learning Institution. And as ODL, we have 3 principles. One is accessibility. The other one, openness, and the last one, student-centeredness. Now, when we look at accessibility and openness, these two principles speak directly to the theme for this year and also open access. So I guess as UNISA, we are positioned by virtue of who we are, but we are also strategically able to drive the whole openness, to drive the whole open access agenda. And as Prof. Mayiwa just said, that it's not just lip service, but it is a transformative force. I mean, who better to drive this agenda than the University of the Land, ODL, who a university driven for openness and accessibility. Next on our list, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored and so proud to introduce our keynote. And I don't know about you, but I am looking forward to the keynote presentation by Udokotela Dr. Nokuthula Mchunu, the Deputy Director for Strategy, Planning and Partnerships at the NRF, the National Research Foundation. With your indulgence, allow me to read just a little bit about Dr. Mchunu, something that I think you will find fascinating. This young and prolific researcher, Udokotela Mchunu, is the inaugural recipient of the Young Scientist Program, a collaboration between China and South Africa. So right there, we see, in Zulu, we say ingqalabutho, we see a brilliant mind doing great things within research. Udokotela Mchunu is, as I said, the Deputy Director at the African Open Science Platform, right, which is hosted by the NRF. So who better to talk to us about open access than the Deputy Director? So Dr. Mchunu, we are ready, we are all ears, and we are excited to listen to your talk this morning. Over to you, Macingwen.
Thank you, Dr. Shandu. Good morning, everybody. I'm here in Mexico and enjoying the Diamond Open Access Summit, which is hosted by Ridderlake. And most of you will know Ridderlake is one of the forefront organization in open access. And today, as a disclaimer, I am wearing my Deputy Director for the African Open Science Platform. I've taken off my hat for strategic partnership within the NRF. So as I speak today, I speak and coming to you, and as Dr. Shandu has given background, so I am a researcher. Although now I am a paper pusher, I've been a researcher for almost 20 years. So I understand the struggles and the need for what we are talking about today. So I will share my presentation. And hopefully it can be seen.
Yes, we can. If you can just project it. There we go. We're good to go.
Okay. So the title I use today is "Make Africa Research Discoverable Towards a Continental Open Science Vision." The second one is our motto at the African Open Science Platform, but open access, as I will define it today, a little bit differently, what is being understood or what prevails right now within the academic scholarly community is how can we use it to make Africa scholarship or Africa research discoverable? Because if the research is not seen, it doesn't exist. So this has been the motto that prevails in Africa and most of the global south, because our research is not seen, so it seems that it doesn't exist. So how can we make it discoverable? So I will start out, hopefully I think it'd be easier defining what is open science. What do we mean by open science? Because open access is the biggest pillar. It is the foundation of open science. It is the start of the movement of open science, where the open access movement has translated to these other areas of knowledge generation. So I'm here using the UNESCO definition, which is the uniting definition. There are other ones, but currently within the community, this is the most accepted definition. And I've highlighted a little bit the ones in green. It basically combines all movement, as I've said, but it aims to make scientific knowledge openly available. And it's been talked about, it must be multilingual. It must be accessible, reusable for everyone. Also touched on by Professor Meyiwa, scientific knowledge must be collaborative, it must be shared, but the most important thing is that it must be benefit for the society, both scientific society and the community at large. So I normally distill this long definition, which was passed, which all 193 member states accepted in November in Paris in 2021, to say they agree with the open science recommendations. So I normally distill it into about three things: is that it is to make open science is there to make knowledge that is generated accessible, inclusive, and equitable, to make sure that it benefits all, and make sure that it can solve the critical global challenges that exist within human society. So within Africa, what are these imperatives for open science? Of course, we need policy. We need to develop commons. What do we understand about this? And think about what are the best practices that are required to actually work on open access. For example, in data, in policy, in dialogues, in networking. So today, as I've said, we are talking about open access, community over commercialization. So I normally, when I want to talk about open access, I want to talk about it as a more open access communication, and add a little bit and add assessment and reward, because I really don't think we can talk about open access or science communication without touching on the issue of how do we reward researchers, or how do we assess researchers that produce or interact with this knowledge. So to go a little bit there, so we would like to just look at the landscape of current academic publishing. So I've grabbed on a little bit of what's been going on in the news. For example, the Scientist is asking, when we talk open access, we know there are always fees with commercial publishers attached to it. Is it really worth the cost? Is that open access to knowledge really worth paying a few $1,000s for it? Another one, of course, is the staggering profit made by publishers, commercial publishers, bad for science? And these are the questions we need to ask. I don't have answers for it. Is the academic publishers, and it's good here that it's the library organizing this, does the libraries have the budget to support the huge amounts that the academics are publishing in open access that require to pay use this? Yes, we have transformative agreements. However, these agreements also come at a cost. So we need to little bit balance this out and really think about it. So for me, with all this happening, the question is, do we need new models or system for publishing? How really democratize science and access to knowledge, both for contribution and access? For us or for the developing world, what are the really key benefits of open access? And how does research assessment and incentive play a role in this? So for open access and publishing to work, yes, I know we have APCs. Once the work is published using this model or the gold open access model, which means the author pays, do we really now think is that community over commercialization? Should we not think, how do we make knowledge generation pipeline a public good? What do we mean by that? When we say public good, we mean at the inception of, for example, a proposal or anything that will provide knowledge. Should all the cost be built into that, so that neither the institution pays or the author pays, both for reading and for accessing, because knowledge is a public good. It is not a commercial good. It is not a profiting good. It is a public good. So either one, which is pay for access or pay to publish, is good, is good for this type of thing. The second point is, how do we enable access? How do we also break down barriers of gender, economic status, and innovation in order to be able to make sure that, again, the knowledge that we produce is available for everyone and everybody can participate also in the contribution of knowledge? We mustn't look at open access or open contribution to knowledge as only getting knowledge off the big wild web. It's also, do we not have a barrier to contribute to the knowledge? Because if then your economic status does not allow you to pay for this, is a problem. For example, I know within the NRF, if we average out all our grants per year, each researcher gets publication from actual doing research. Two, what happens to the emerging researcher who doesn't have that grant? Can they then participate in open access knowledge generation? And of course, we need to make sure that we have adequate protection for areas that you have privacy, security, and IP issues. And I normally say this last point shouldn't take up a lot of discussion. Yes, we need to protect the knowledge, but we know that we're already publishing. So we are talking about the rest of the stuff that we are publishing openly, and how do we actually do it that is in a democratized way, and everybody can participate in both access and contribution to knowledge. Comes to my point, which I then introduced, is that then we need to think about research assessments. We need to think about how do we reward researchers that participate in open access and open science activity. This point will become a little bit clear when I propose which models of open access we should really support. So the impact which we now think about, or what normally universities or the academic communities recognize as what we call citation indexes, impact factors, your H indexes. This is what we recognize. And this is what determines if a researcher generally is promoted to a senior lecturer, professor, or associate professor, or full professor. Or yes, within the NRF, some of these are taken up to determine how the person is rated. But as we've all known, and if you read literature around this, because we have created one matrix, and then when you try to measure something with only one way, it inherently provides a really big flaw, because it really limits your picture or your view of what the researcher does. Because if you think about the whole pipeline of what the researcher does, they produce data, they interact with the society, they interact with students. But if 90% of their academic or their career is solely dependent on how many papers they publish and where they publish. This becomes a little bit of creates a problem within the system. And then this is where now we have a problem with predatory publishing, where people just want to publish and then just pay to get publishing, and then you have issues of quality. So we need to think a little bit now, how do we develop different or comprehensive impact? So if we listen to a little bit some of the talk that Professor Mayor talked about, is how can we use collaboration and cooperation to make sure that universities have an impact in the society. We don't want to use collaboration and cooperative to make sure that universities have an impact in scholarly publication. This doesn't serve the society in a way. It serves our scholarly community, not our communities in where we live. So I normally make this example. It says, as a researcher, or as I was a researcher, when you would write a proposal, you will ask, what is the problem statement? You will say, oh, this community, for example, in Hammanskraal, I'm using the current example, has the cholera outbreak. I want to solve this, and this is the solution I am proposing. And of course, if you give me the money, I will do this. And of course, the researchers goes back into their lab. Sorry, guys, I'm a microbiologist, so I'm using this example. They go to their lab, they do the research, they find a brilliant solution. Do you know what the researcher does? After that, they think, oh, will make a nice publication. We sit, you write the publication, the manuscript, you submit to a journal. It takes, depending where you are, 6 to a year. You get 6 months to a year to prepare that you get your results. You are published. It's a good impact factor. It's a reputable journal. However, where is the problem in this pipeline? The problem is that the community that I wrote for the proposal in never gets to hear about the solution. They should have been the first point of call to say, oh, this is what we've discovered, this is what it should happen. It could be the community, it could be the actual authorities that are in charge of trying to solve the problem. This happens because the researcher is expected to publish, and that is their measuring stick within the universities or institutions. So we need then to think about comprehensive impact. This is why I made this example. How do we broaden the impact for scientific research on human society? How do we try to measure that? This, of course, I agree, will need a completely new way of thinking, complex design, thinking about alternative metrics. For example, scientists struggle to get the information in COVID, while some misinformation was going through social media, because scientists were still going through our old way of communication, which is scholarly publication, which, for example, my mother will never read, but she will read a WhatsApp group, which the WhatsApp group probably screen grab something on social media. And then how do we measure the social media interaction? I do not have an answer, but I'm sure there are people who could measure this and tell you how impactful researchers are if they can use some of this different way of communication. So in order to really change and equip researchers for both impactful open access and open science, we need to make sure that we change these behaviors. We need to make sure that we think about how to incentivize impactful societal research. So for me, this is the current world. This is what we're working with. This is what we need to think about. How do we award researchers from doing this instead of using the current way of only thinking? I'm not saying impact factors are bad, but they shouldn't be the weight or the only thing that determines how researchers should be. And they shouldn't carry a bigger weight than community-driven research, which has more impact on the society. So, of course, and then in scholarly publication, these are some of the challenges that we face. Language barriers, low digital visibility in African scholarly output, restricted research funding, and of course, some of our networks are underrepresented in the global communities. So now I'm going to go a little bit on what exactly do we think in the African open science we want to do. So we want to use open science, and part of it is open access, to make sure that the scientist is at the cutting edge of this data-intensive modern society, to make sure that they're equipped as leaders and be visible as leaders in addressing African and global challenges. So we need a little bit of supporting pillars for this. We need to make sure that we have the infrastructure, we develop enough data and AI skills, we promote collaboration, we create networks, and we create dialogue and open science and access networks that will discuss this issue within the continent. So what we've done a little bit, we have appointed the different regional nodes that will do the work in different regions in Africa. We currently appointed one in North Africa, sitting in Egypt, in East Africa, sitting in Kenya, and of course, Ubuntu Net Alliance. Some of you will be familiar with TENET in South Africa. Our NREN belongs to Ubuntu Net Alliance. And with them, we have tried to envision something as very well known by the UNISA library, is a locally hosted African repository. I am putting up this example to try and get us to think about how we can make repositories, institutional repositories, regional repositories, as the way our scientists should communicate their science, with the proviso that we recognize repositories as a way to communicate science. They shouldn't be an added thing. They should be the mainstream. Because some of the funding that we are putting in APCs should be going to supporting libraries that will support repositories. And some libraries also host what we call diamond open access journals, where author doesn't pay and the institute doesn't pay. But the money comes from those institutes that host those journals. So the diamond way, which is journals that neither the institute or the author pays, and repositories, which we call green open access, are the ways to consolidate open access where authors and institutions do not have a barrier of financial cost. So, for example, what we're trying to imagine with Africa Archives, which we kind of absorb with Ubuntu Net Alliance, is trying to see how we can integrate language. So, unfortunately for you guys, since I am half Zulu and half Xhosa, I've asked them to send me a page that is a little bit translated in Zulu, and we're using AI models to try and figure out how the platform, we can take it to the next step into translating and using AI models to translate metadata, to translate abstracts that are loaded into the system, so that it's easier for all African scientists to have access to this. We are also trying to figure out how we can connect the archive to all institutional repositories, so that we can, in the continent, be the window to access UNISA repository, to access a repository in Makerere, to access a repository in Nigeria, so that we are connected. Because the other thing we've seen, that institutional repositories also, they are not as connected. As the executive director of library services has intimated, because of space, of geographical location, sometimes this makes it impossible for everybody to access. But if we can imagine all repositories, all libraries connected in some way, and somebody making sure that they are connected, we can reach each other quite easily. And also, if then repositories and university hosted presses are recognized as good ways to publish and supported as such, then we will make it a step forward and to make sure that our knowledge is accessible and we can contribute into the global knowledge. And then we will not have the questions asked is that, is your knowledge, if you want to publish in more global journal, your paper is not acceptable because it doesn't fit our scope. There is no scope in repositories because they are local. Whatever is produced, everybody can access because it's within the local context. And of course, just to let everybody know, in conjunction with our relationship with Ubuntu Net Alliance and Africa Archive, the African Open Science offers, again, DOIs or training. Also in DOIs, we are welcome to have librarian trainings and open science training in both data and open access. If you want to have a contact with me, I am happy to share with you guys what we are doing and how we can collaborate with UNISA Library and UNISA to move both open access and open science as a whole forward within the institution and within South Africa and the continent. I will stop there. Thank you. I hope I made some sense this morning. Sorry, I'm in Mexico, so it is. Did I lock myself out? Yeah, I'm in Mexico. Yeah, so I woke up, it's 2 a.m. in the morning now.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate that you woke up in the wee hours of the morning, your side, just to join us today. We are really grateful. Thank you so much for touching on issues of impact, issues of costs, and even issues of AI. These are relevant and these are important as we discuss open access. As you were presenting around the beginning, you reminded me of that quintessential question: if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, has it fallen, and so on. So if we publish and there's no open access, I mean, our publications are closed in, what impact will that have? Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now, we'll allow about 5-7 minutes of engagement. Let's allow questions, let's allow comments, because indeed the whole idea behind Open Access Week is to allow opportunities, open spaces for engagement, for discussions, for even questions on how we can foster openness. Let me see, Ms. Fatima Daris, will you assist us with the chat? And also if there are any hands that are raised for questions, engagement, and so on. And I'm citing directly from the website here where it said this year's theme, community or commercialization, is supposed, right, is supposed to invigorate discussions on which approaches to open scholarship prioritize the best interests of the public and academic community, and which are not. So you touched earlier about communities benefiting from the research. So colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let's allow this opportunity for engagement. I am checking the chat as well. You can post your questions or raise your hand if there is something you'd like to contribute. Remember, this space is for discussions on open access. Let's see if we have questions, anything? Ms. Doris, anything yet?
Good morning, Prof. Nothing yet.
Okay, then that means your 2 a.m. rise was worth it. You did such a stunning and brilliant job that everything is clear for me personally. I am grateful for the supporting pillars that you spoke about and the different models that could be considered. So I was taking notes furiously, like a possessed woman. And you asked, how do we break down access and how do we enable access? So I was just taking notes for further discussions, even in my department. I guess in my head, the question is, and this is linked to what I saw on the UNESCO website, where they said South Africa is one of, if not the leading country when it comes to open access. And so the question is, how do we then, as South African institutions, then foster that collaboration with the broader African states? You did touch on it, I think, towards the end of your presentation. But what other ideas? And I'm thinking here from starting small, say as UNISA, and then maybe spreading to other institutions in South Africa and Africa. How do we foster that? What other practical examples would you share with us? Over to you.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and I think that when we really go into it, is that there's a reason why South Africa is one of the most participatory in open access models as they exist with commercial publishers. It's all about the power of finances. So generally, yes, if you look at the most contracts or most APC waivers in commercial publishers, South Africa is not included in the waiver because we are not seen as low income country. So the other African states in general, it is simply hard to afford any type of access or any type of open access without a sponsorship or without a waiver. So then it means their contribution to open access is left out of the window. Two, the measures put in by government, by DHED to try and incentivize publication has really helped. Yes, it has created some challenges, but it has helped to make sure some of this cost are taken care of. The other thing is that if you've seen what is happening with DSI, they have really taken a lead in open science, and South Africa is one of the very few in the world that has a draft full policy on open access. Of course, implementation will be a nightmare. So we have been kind of really been forefront of what requires or what we are thinking about in open access and open science. So how do we then bring everybody along? And that was the question. I think is how we do open access that will bring everybody along. It's the question, for example, for UNISA, how the repository in UNISA can help support or share their repository knowledge with other African scholars. But that would only happen if the system, the whole academic system, not only in UNISA, recognize repositories as the first place to go, or recognize universities as the first place to publish their work. So it kind of like we have to work on the recognition system, then the researchers will share their knowledge with the repositories first. Then the repositories can be properly financed or supported in a much bigger way. But as long as repositories, sorry to the library, I will use this word as a stepchild to say whatever is left, yeah, we can have a repository that we deposit just theses and some other stuff, but you need to publish in global journal. That's the way. we need to really think, how do we value our repositories and journal supported, university supported journals into the system of assessment for researchers. It means we might have to get rid of some of these metrics, like your H index, your impact factor, into trying to figure out how impactful somebody's research is.
Thank you very much. What an insightful response. I hear it. We keep going round and round, and we come back to issues of money. And we go round and round, and we come back to issues of incentives. So thank you very, very much. And we hear you. And we do have our work cut out for us, even with issues of perceptions, where you are more celebrated when you publish globally in a journal in the US or Europe and so on. We thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Could we have another round of applause for our keynote, Dr. Nokuthula Mchunu? We thank you. We celebrate you. We hope you enjoy the rest of your time overseas. Take care. We appreciate you. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we move on to our next speaker. I'm delighted to present to you Professor M.D. Maganu. Prof. Maganu is now the current director, and I need to read this correctly. She's the current executive director, right? There's a difference. Executive director for tuition and facilitation of learning at UNISA. Prof. Maganu is not just not only the executive director, but she has a heart for communities. We've seen that with some of her community engagement projects. We've seen that as she has been the chairperson of the UNISA Women's Forum, and we saw that when she was the tuition manager at the College of Education. So it is quite befitting that Prof. Maganu would be one of our speakers as we commemorate Open Access Week and we emphasize community over commercialization. What a befitting opportunity for Prof. Maganu, for someone who has a heart for communities, to speak to us, give us a word or two, a thought or two. May I then hand over to Prof. M.D. Maganu. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Thulile Shandu. There's a bit of light where I am. I don't know how to. Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Let me acknowledge the program director, Dr. Thulile Shandu Petla. Let me acknowledge the executive director and congratulate him also, Professor Mpongwe Be, a very humble man, but with many accolades. Let me also acknowledge the staff in the library, everybody at whatever level. Let me acknowledge you, and also the invite to the library. Program director, I have a relationship with the library, though I never studied library, except only when I was doing teaching, at TCE. We had a period for library for 3 years, and I was asking myself, why library? But I have a relationship with the library. Professor Mwepe, executive director. I was introduced to the library at the age of 9 when I was doing my standard 1. I'm not saying grade, standard 1. I grew up in Atteridgeville. There was a public library in the street of Mareka. And every student at that age, we were compelled to visit the library and also take a book, one or two, read it fortnight and send it back. And when you go back to class, you had to relate the story at that age of what you saw in that book, what you read, what you understood in that book. So I loved the library from that age. Even now, I still love the library, even though I don't even have module 101 of whatever. So I want to say congratulations for you having this event, which is so dynamic. I listened to the speaker that has just completed, Dr. Noktula Mkunu. Thank you very much for giving us this perspective of how do we view the repository and how do we consider it? Do we take it as a stepchild or do we take it as the first point of contact or where we publish? Program director has said that I am in love with communities. Indeed, I love community engagement or engaged scholarship because this is where I believe massive knowledge is immersed. Our theme for this year is saying open access, community over commercialization. And in the space where I am is more of a support department, but we work closely with the academics. And I also try to put in an element of community. How can we extend our reach and influence to the community? Briefly, let me say from literature that open access has really emerged as a beacon of hope, promising to democratize the wealth of human intellect. Furthermore, open access movement at its core champions the principle that knowledge is a universal human right, transcending geographical and human economic boundaries. And let's look at what Agenda 2363 is saying, and also what the SDGs are saying. Because if we restrict knowledge, we will never achieve the SDGs and we will never achieve or attain Agenda 2063 imperatives. Open access opens the floodgates of learning. And this is where, as a university, we really need to focus on and say, how do we tap into this space of open access and how do we maximize our publications there? Open access empowers established scholars, but also serves as a catalyst for nurturing the next generation of African intellectuals, not only African, but global. But because we are in Africa today, I want to position myself and my thinking on African intellectuals. By removing financial barriers to knowledge, we ignite the spark of innovation, paving the way for the emergence of industries and technologies that can drive economic prosperity across the continent. Now let's come to this commercialization. You know, when I look at the portfolio where library falls in, it is having an element of commercialization. Nothing bad, but also we need to look at it in a skeptical eye sometimes, or we need to look at it with a critical eye. Ali Byron, in his work of 2020, argues that commercialization in universities has become an undeniable principle since there is a shift in the role of universities from knowledge producers to producers of capital from knowledge. It should be considered as a new goal in gaining economic benefits. Now, we know that we are actually, as a university, our aim is to create knowledge, to produce knowledge. And also, what comes into this element, as Ali Barron is saying in his article, he is saying we are shifting our role as being producers of capital from knowledge. Let me proceed to say commercialization versus moral economics. Let's look at this also with a critical eye. Notions of justice and fairness about private profit being made through public exploitation. We normally see them from the researchers who go into communities, get knowledge, publish, and where are the moral fibers as far as publications are concerned? A perceived lack of control in terms of governance is also seen in the way publications are done. Commercialization, it involves a profit-driven model where access to academic content often comes with a price tag. This is normally seen in the subscription fees, paywalls, individual article pages. The librarians that I normally work close with, it's Me Danisile Mutsatsi and Me Anna Marie Stradom. When I get this lock, which is saying, no, you can't get this purchase or what, I normally cry unto them and say, Me Mutsatsi or Me Stradom, please help me. I need this article because the work that I'm doing currently, I must read this, otherwise I won't be able to proceed. And lo and behold, this is the precious element or assistance that we get from our librarians. Implications for commercialization. When we put or we heighten commercialization at at any institution or in any community, then we renew the knowledge divide, because it will in a way hamper or become a barrier towards access to knowledge. Poorer countries will be disadvantaged in accessing knowledge. Now, because I'm a community person, I'm looking at who is in the community. Where do we get knowledge? The elders in communities. This is where we normally go and dig knowledge from. These are forming a critical element in the community. And now we need to question ourselves when we bring in an element of commercialization. Where do we position those elders in communities where we normally go and say, I want to know how Baba Bakatla Bakafela used to raise their children, or how Bakatla Bakafela used to lead in their communities. We go there, we mine, we dig knowledge, but we don't come back and pay. We don't come back and honor. This is where the moral of economics and ethics come into the picture. Participants in research projects. We go to schools, we go to communities, we get knowledge. This is the community. Participants in engaged scholarship projects. Later in my slides, I'm going to also give a practical application of where we go to communities and mine and dig knowledge. Knowledge keepers. Knowledge keepers can be any person that we can, come across with. During the COVID-19, we actually went to the elders in communities. We went to those who work with herbs, and we were able to get knowledge and healing because we wanted medication. And we realized that the tablets that we were buying were not doing the magic. Hence, we got the remedy in herbs that were used by elders, lengana, unhlonyana, or artemisia in the scientific language. So live libraries, these are the communities. Live libraries or walking libraries are the people that we meet with in the streets. I want to cite a famous professor, Professor Odora Catherine Hoppers, who wrote a lot about the community of elders, and also Professor Joseph Day, who also tapped into the elders' cultural knowledge that this needs to be respected and it must bring brought forth to the academic world so that we are able to realize the importance of communities. Now, as we celebrate open access, let us also ponder on the issue of community. And I like the theme, which is saying community over commercialization. These people are important. Professor Ndlovu Gacheni, who was also at UNISA for some years, he is saying the term elder is a generative concept. It describes the identity and status of a particular community adult, one who is revered and respected as having led good and exemplary life, an embodiment of local wisdom and knowledge, and having the role and responsibility to transmit their accumulated wisdom and knowledge through teachings and mentorship of young learners. Now, as we say, an elder is a respectable person in a community. We look up to this person. Now, when we go there and mine knowledge because we want to publish, what do we do? Let me give a practical example of what I've done in recent year. I think this publication, it's a publication of 2023, but the data was mined in 2021, 2022. Now, I want to look at this theme, community over commercialization. This was a UWF output because we got a call from HESA, and I sent it to the UWF members so that we can look into the engaged scholarship projects that we were involved in and publish something from an empirical data that we were working with in the communities. I was involved in a community of Ekurhuleni, and Dr. Mulocha Makwena was involved in a community, I think here it's Eastern Cape. Then we wrote our publications. They were published in this book published by Springer in 2022, Women's Empowerment for a Sustainable Future. Now, I worked with a community, women who some do not have even matric, some had matric but unemployed. It was a community of unemployed women. We were trying to bring in some skills so that they can earn a living, be able to learn how to cook, how to sew, and crop farming, poultry farming, beekeeping, biodigest. So there were a number of skills, computer skills, that were extended to this group of women. They were 45 in number. But I worked closely with Tate Hector Mutudi, who was an admin staff at Ekurhuleni UNISA campus. So what I want to extend is that through dialogue, through interviews, we were able to publish. Now, this is where the question comes. Prof. Mahano, Tate Mutudi, you have published. This will be captured now in our submissions for commercialization, for an incentive. Now, what about those 45 women? We got them trained, they received certificates, we mine data from them, and then so what? Another community that I want to demonstrate, which I worked with. There's a book published in 2020. I earned the incentive last year of this book because D had recognized it. Communities contributing to the economy. The University of South Africa earned something from DHET, and I also earned something. Who were involved in the research? Community comprised of officials in the Department of Correctional Services, the offender learners, the teachers, and principal. Because it was an action research where I immersed my life in this project from 2010, while I was still working at the University of Johannesburg. When I came to UNISA, I continued with this project. And to date, I'm still working there because daily it's an action research. Every year there's something that we need to intervene on and continue with our research. Another angle where I'm involved is a special school. I started in 2013 to immerse myself, my academic rigor in the special school, because by training, I'm in psychology of education. It does cover or cut across also inclusivity. Now, this is an article also that I published in 2020, was it 2020 years, using idioms and proverbs as an indigenous psychological way in rehabilitating juvenile offenders. A wellness perspective, it's myself there, University of South Africa. Already I earned incentives. Who were the community? Where did I test these idioms and proverbs as an indigenous way of rehabilitation? And this, I was bringing forth an Afro psychology in working with the juvenile offenders. You can see it's me there. This is the place where I normally go and tap into the knowledge of this community, teachers, officials there, principal, and also prison warders or correctional warders. So I'm trying to advance something that, yes, you go there, tap into the knowledge, tap into the use of these idioms to say, le ojwa, le sale metsi, meaning that you can only mold the character of a child while he's still young. These are juveniles. Some are 15 years old, 16 years old, but due to the behavior or the social ills, they found themselves behind walls. So how do we use that idiom? And the other one, or proverb, how do we use that a child will normally behave the way he or he sees the elders behaving in his community? So we were using a number of idioms to come up with the Afro psychology of saying we can rehabilitate these youngsters. Another example is at a special school. These learners who are graduating, they were not doing matric per se, but at a particular age of 18 or 21, depending in which province they are, they normally graduate because they do not get mainstream education. So here I worked closely with a colleague in the Department of Leadership and Management within UNISA, where we wrote an article on safety in the schools, but we said supervision of learners with intellectual disability in a special school, in local parentis of teachers as a wellness perspective. So it was published, I think, 2017. So the support that you accord, Prof. Mahano, in this community, the guidance that you give to the educators or teachers in the school, the parents, the way they must take care of their children who grow up with their disabilities or intellectual disabilities. Now, as I'm trying to conclude, I'm trying to bring some thoughts that we really need to think deep as researchers, as engaged scholars, to say the moral economics and ethics. What is the moral economics surrounding communities that contribute to research? What are the commercial benefits for communities? Must researchers share incentives with the community? I'm leaving us with these questions And some researchers in this book, the participants, that is the community, they said, Prof, what you can do for us is to make our names visible in the book. We know that normally as researchers, we write participant 1, participant 2, or, parent or teacher 1, teacher 2. They said, we want to have our names in the book. Yes, their names are included. Then the last chapter is in this book is the voices from the teachers. They wrote their own stories. We just edited a little bit. They gave lessons on how they learned in taking care of learners living with intellectual disabilities. They captured it as it is. If you open the first chapter, will say, I, Daniel Mutepe, a teacher in the school, Obed More Special School, learned how to teach these children, even if I didn't do inclusive education, by doing 1, 2, 3. And that excited them. The only reward that I gave them was to have a copy, each one of them to have a copy of the book. But did I share the incentive with them? No. Am I morally sound? Am I ethical? I'm challenging myself also that community over commercialization. I like to thank you, Program Director, with those questions that I just posed.
How wonderful, how thought-provoking and challenging those words, Prof, have left us all asking those questions. Can we have a round of applause for our Professor Professor MD Magano? What a challenging question that you have posed at the end as we think of communities over commercialization. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let us ask for questions, comments. You can use the chat, you can raise your hand, and as we engage, may I then encourage you to get up, to stretch to the left, stretch to the right, and you can grab something to drink as we continue engaging. Unfortunately, we cannot stop for a break because our time is a bit compromised right now, but let us continue. As we ask questions, you can grab something to drink and stretch. May I then ask again, May Fatima Daris, could you please assist with the chat as we ponder and we reflect on the questions that were posed by May Prof Magano, as well as the examples she gave us. Indeed, I love what you said, Prof. Open the floodgates of learning. I'm reminded of a song that we usually sing. We say, let it rain, let it rain. Open the floodgates of learning. So we are opening the floodgates of learning. May Fatima, do we have questions on the chat?
Doctor, we've got a question from Mr. Maja. How can we overcome the challenges of open access publishing? We have a hand that is raised. And then there are many, many comments of appreciation for Professor Magano's research.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So what we will do, we shall hand over to Freeman Zulu for your comment or question, and then we shall get a response from the question on the chat about that balance, and from Freeman Zulu. Over to you, Makeb. Oh, I see Freeman's mic is not activated. Can we have his mic? Okay, I've just allowed your mic. Over to you, Makeba. Freeman Zulu. Please unmute. All right, let's continue. Freeman, if you could just post your question or comment on the chat. I imagine there might be an issue with the microphone. And Prof. Magano, I don't know if you may share your insights, a word or two on that question on how we can balance or overcome the challenges of open access publishing. I do believe this leans towards Dr. Mchunu's presentation as well, but if you can, Medaris, is Dr. Mchunu still in the meeting? If not, let's just give it to Mayor Prof. Magano for an insight and for a comment or two. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Program Director. I think this one is more directed to Dr. Mchuno. Thank you. Yes.
I do not see Dr. Mchunu, so I thought maybe you might share motherly insight, if possible.
Prof. Mangwepe may take a bite on it.
That is motherly insight, sending others and delegating. Prof. Mwepe, any insight?
Madam Program Director, you request me to provide insight on which comment?
Yes, Prof, on the one of overcoming challenges of open access publishing. Now, Maja, you did not specify a challenge. You mentioned challenges. Okay. So, Prof, maybe you can pick one and comment on it.
As we have heard from the presentations from the colleagues, starting with the keynote speaker, the open access, it has some pillars. Open access, when we talk about open access, is not only just to publish the papers so that they are available. There are a number of the types of open access from gold to black. And also we need even data, open data is part of open access. So most of the challenges that I've experienced, especially with the institutional repository, relates to depositing data into institutional repositories. So such a challenge can be, such a problem can be overcame through sensitizing the researchers, because people think that if they keep the data on themselves in their own laptops, it is only for them. But depositing such data in institutional repositories will help the researcher himself in terms of reaching out to many people, and other people can also use it as secondary data analysis. And also it ensures credibility to one's data, that the data that you have collected, other people can interpret it differently, and also you are not you are open to it, saying that you are it is not a fabricated data or whatever. And then it also increases citation index. So there are a lot of benefits that we can teach people about open access. What I see as a challenge is for the whole open access is sustainability in terms of because publishers are publishing for commercial purpose. So it means that libraries must also become publishers, so that they can host this for free. Hence, I said in my introductory remarks that libraries are by default or by design also open access. So the key is the funding for sustainability, because publishers cannot just make the open access just open, because they need to sustain that and they need to pay salaries. But slowly but surely we can move towards that if we collaborate as institutions. Let me pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Prof, for that response. Indeed, the issues of sustainability and as well as funding, we keep coming back to this one. I love what Dr. Mkunu said earlier, that when we speak of open access, we're speaking of access to as well as contribution to knowledge. So it's something that we also have to think about. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in the house, I am elated to present to you the next speaker. Before I do that, can we just have another round of applause for Professor Maganu for her presentation? Another round of applause, everyone. Prof, you can see from the comments on the chat that we are also grateful and we are challenged by the questions you posed to us. Hopefully we can have a follow-up session where we can discuss some of these, some of the questions, so that we are researchers who are also acknowledging communities. Thank you very much, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to be presenting to you Ms. Lynn Samara, who is in marketing at Springer Nature. Lynn, I had the pleasure of watching a YouTube presentation where you were speaking, I think it was about a week ago, and you were speaking on transformative agreement, and I learned so much from that presentation. So thank you very, very much for that clarity and the information. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just read here just a little bit. I won't read the whole bio because we all have it, but Lynn is a dedicated professional, so that's one. And what I really, really love is that her primary goal has been to raise awareness about the optimal utilization of library resources, empowering librarians and researchers alike with the essential tools to propel the journey of discovery. We are here because we are researchers, we are universities, and we really do want to be propelled in the journey of discovery. Lynn, we are so excited to be listening to you this morning. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I actually feel very excited and honored to be speaking after all the well-knowledgeable and really highly educated presenters that has spoken before me. I actually learned a lot from that. And thanks for the UNISA team and for the library team who has worked hard on with me previously on creating the presentation, and who took the time and dedicated some effort to think of me to invite and present. Very interesting to hear from previous speakers about communities versus commercial. And speaking from, maybe you would consider me speaking from the commercial side, but let me show you the benefits of having open access published through the platforms of publishers, and specifically through Springer Nature and in collaboration with the transformative agreement with Sunlick. Just let me give you an overview, and I'm sure many of you know Springer Nature. We have 4 different divisions that support researchers, students, and even professionals at different areas and disciplines disciplines. I belong to the research division, which offers you the content that you can search through in terms of journals, articles, books, and author discovery solutions. Of course, there are other services that enable students to study in terms of offering international curriculum and language learning, and other divisions that I don't want to go through at the moment. But this is the division that is currently working on creating open access content to be available all over the world for the researchers through transforming our journals to be open access journals. So this journey had started a few years ago, and we were, as Springer Nature, one of the leading publishers into adapting to offer full access content, full open access content to the researchers, and to have the content available for researchers anywhere in the world and from day one of being published. I have heard from the previous presentations, concerns maybe, or questions about, is it really open access? Is it from day one open access? When exactly it is open access? And in Springer Nature, all the content that is published open access is published open access as a gold module, which means from day one of publishing, it is available for everyone all over the world, anytime, on link.springer.com, to be searchable open access, not by subscribers to the platform. Over the past few years, I'm happy to say that I have just known that we have exceeded 1,600,000 articles. Last year, it was 1 million articles open access, but now it is more, 1.5 million. And 16% of all the open access content that is published all over the world comes globally, comes from Springer Nature. And now there is more than 2,200 actually books, not only 1,500 books that are open access. Why I think we care for communities, because during COVID, we offered the content of textbooks to be available for free for 3 months almost, if I remember correctly, to be downloadable for free for everyone, and that resulted in, I think, more than, if I remember correctly, more than 200 million downloads at that point, and the books were downloaded highly by all the students, all the researchers around the world for free during that tough time. Until this date, we have collaborated with more than 2,500,000 authors around the world to publish their content open access. But in the first place, why open access, and why do we care for researchers to publish open access, and how we allow researchers to do this? As we all know, open access doesn't mean free publishing. And I heard one of the people who asked questions that has said, yes, the publishers need to sustain the business, or it is a commercial reason. Yes, part of it, but as well, we receive millions and millions of articles to review, to look through, and to find editors to look into. But we still support the open access process. And in order to keep the content available for everyone all over the world, and to have a very high quality content as well, we sign agreements with consortia, with universities, with institutions all over the world, in order to enable the researchers who are interested in publishing their articles open access to have it funded to be published. So they don't have to pay the APCs and the cost of publishing. What we do is we have agreements with consortia that pay for the researchers on behalf of researchers to have their content published open access. So currently, in collaboration with SANLIC, and UNISA is part of this agreement, we do have an agreement that covers researchers from more than 29 institutions in South Africa, and the University of Botswana, and the University of Namibia. So it covers the affiliated researchers who have their articles approved for publishing to have their articles be published open access with fees covered in the Springer hybrid journals. All the questions about this agreement, who does it cover, what journals are included, are in the link that I'm sharing with you here, and you can refer to it. Even if you look on Google for Springer Nature and open access agreement in South Africa, you will find the page easily and you can refer to it for more information. I have heard a lot of benefits from the previous speakers about open access and why is it important for all communities and in order to have the knowledge available for everyone, which is amazing. And I have also in Springer Nature, we have had a white paper prepared, and actually this white paper was prepared twice on with a bit of a gap of a time in order to look into the benefits of publishing open access or measuring the outreach, if I may call it that, of the open access published articles in comparison with the articles that were published the subscription or the classic module. So we examined almost 70,000 articles published in Springer Nature hybrid journals, and there was some significant actually results. And I heard one of the speakers say that we measure usually through the number of downloads, citations, and the social media attention or the altmetric attention of the article. And why it is important that we do measure through that, because this is exactly that shows us there is a high interest in the article. The articles that were published open access were published 6 more times. They were downloaded 6 more times. The citations were 1.6 more times, and the altmetric score of those articles were even 5 more times, comparing to the articles that were published the classic module. Okay, but what is the benefit of this? Like, if we get more downloads, citations, what benefit would a researcher get from that? First of all, the increased visibility of the research is highly important because it gives the researcher, their institution, and of course, the field they publish at, they get the opportunity to have their work reproduced. They get more opportunities to collaborate with other researchers from around the world because they are getting an attention to their research from all over the world, and it is immediately accessed online by a much higher number of researchers. This allows an acceleration in science, and it all benefits us on all levels and on all aspects of life, I believe. The citation advantage is very important because this means that this research is being a reference and it is being acknowledged by the research community. This whole thing is gonna create an acceleration in the improvement of the science production that we see all over the world. I mentioned the agreement. I mentioned why open access publishing, but I also want to give a shout out to the SANLEC agreement and UNISA under the SANLEC agreement, and show you a little bit of an insight of the usage of the articles, because I just mentioned how important the usage is. The usage of the articles published by all the institutions under the agreement that has been available since this year only. And I want to show you actually how many articles were published from South Africa, from those 29 institutions, and the usage and where it was used. So we can see here that we do have, like, until this day, it's a little bit more number of articles. 515 articles have been published until August, and I believe we have crossed 600 something. And the usage of those articles has now exceeded almost 400,000 downloads all over the world, mainly from China, United States, South Africa, India, Germany, France, and other places on the world, but those are the top using countries. What I want to highlight here is, and why I think it is very important for the content to be published open access, is because more than 70% of this content was downloaded and viewed by anonymous researchers, which means they are not subscribers to link.springer.com. The ones who used and we recognize in Springer Nature are only 29% of the more than 400,000 until this day. That's why open access is highly important, because it reaches out to people who couldn't be able to access this information before. Let me give a shout out to the UNISA authors and the publications from UNISA with the agreement. I'm going to also show SDGs publications, SDGs with SANLEC, and the total number of publication and the global usage. Let's look into that. An overall look of publications under SDGs in specific. Output of the South Africa by all publishers, and this is not only UNISA. So publications with all publishers from 2020 till 2023, and this is only about SDGs. And that's, I wanted to highlight SDGs for you because we all care for our communities. The publications under those topics would help our communities in a way or another, and would definitely help for better communities. So 56 almost 57,000 articles, 56,990. With Springer Nature, we do see a very good portion, almost might hit 80% of the content published among all publishers. And that's only from year 2020 till 2023. I want to show you SDGs publications output of UNISA with all publishers comparing to Springer Nature. And I really want to hear a clap here. Over the past 3 years, we have seen more than 3,000 publications, which I also do see a very healthy portion of those publications were with Springer Nature. And those are the numbers of SDG publications output of UNISA with SANLEC agreement or under the SANLEC agreement. And here, I don't know if we do have any of those names at the call, but I do want to give them a clap. I want to thank them, give them a shout out. Very impressive number of publications, and they are actually the top 15 publishing authors in UNISA from year 2020 to 23. And we do see a highest publication of 230 publications. And also I want to show the authors that are the top 15 publishing authors in UNISA, but specifically about SDGs, and why SDGs in specific, because it is the topics that now there is a focus on by the United Nations in order to sustain and develop our communities all over the world. So those are the top names and the top SDG publishing authors in UNISA under the agreement. And I would like to thank you here. There is also a very healthy number of publications for UNISA with SANLEC under the agreement since the beginning of the agreement, not only with SDGs, and there is a growth in publications that is happening every month steadily with the agreement, not only with SANLEC, not only with UNISA and SANLEC, but also with other institutions. And I'm very happy that we are still in the beginning of the agreement. I would say it's almost a year now, but still in the early stages of adapting the process of having the researchers educated, understand more the open access process, why to publish open access, the benefits of open access, and that in fact they do have the support they need, the financial support they need to publish their articles open access and have it reach or to all over the world, to other researchers everywhere immediately. And I hope we can do that more and more until we see a higher growth in the number of publications that we see with the agreement. And with that, I would like to thank you. And if you have any questions for me, please let me know.
Fantastic, absolutely brilliant. What an amazing way to round off this webinar with those numbers. Numbers don't lie. I believe in numbers. And these are staggering, almost 57,000 publications. And I'm even looking at the SDG linked publications. And it's quite encouraging to see the impact and the contribution of UNISA. I don't know about you, colleagues, but I was happy to recognize a few names, even from my college, CHS. I don't know if you saw someone from your college, but I saw a few names from my college, so I'm happy. And thank you so much, Ms. Samara. You've just made my day. I'm excited. I'm happy. And those numbers, I know, 2 thumbs up. Those numbers, hey, they are just so encouraging. And I'm hoping that even emerging researchers in our midst today are also encouraged to not only publish, but also consider very strongly open access publishing. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's open the space for questions and comments if there are any. Let's see, questions. I'm checking the chats. Yes, Prof. Mwepe, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for Lynn for such a great presentation. My question relates to the articles published under transformative agreements. So I just want to check, what are the publishers doing to ensure that these publications are excluded in the subscriptions of databases, because we may now be paying twice for the same article as the library, first through those vouchers, and then secondly, by default through the subscriptions in the databases. Thank you.
Excellent question. Thank you for that. So first of all, you asked me about publishers, and I can only speak for Springer Nature, not all other publishers, but I understand the concern here that we paid for publishing and then we paid for reading. That's why it is a read and publish agreement. It is all under the same roof, so you wouldn't be paying twice for publishing and for reading. So you pay like one price for all the content, that includes publishing. It might be a bit a higher price because there are other services included, but you are not paying more, or I would not say more. You wouldn't pay twice for the article. There is an APC amount that is calculated for each article to be published, and this is a calculation that we usually make in order to have a fair deal, let's say.
Thank you very much.
I see the thumbs up.
Yeah. That's perfect. And I'm happy. I was also very happy to hear that question, because it also speaks to what Dr. Mkunu said earlier about access to knowledge, which would be your readers, right? So reading, as well as contribution to knowledge, which would be publishing. So thank you very much for that response. I do not see any other comment on the chat, and I do not see hands raised. So then that means you did a stellar job there. Everything is clear. Again, ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for our speaker, Ms. Lynn Samara. Round of applause. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. We thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Well,
Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's come back to our program. And now it's time that we go to the vote of thanks. It's been a feast. It's been a wonderful spread of presentations. We have eaten, we have filled our mental stomachs, and we have learned quite a lot. At the beginning, when Prof. Mwebe welcomed us, he did mention my Sepedi is very bad. I speak Fanagalo Sepedi, but I think I heard something about an idiom that says we welcome all the visitors because when we get visitors, then we know we will eat and eat and eat and feast. I think that is a very rough translation. So again, we are very, very grateful to our speakers. And again, we thank and acknowledge our Chancellor, the Honorable His Excellency Dr. Utata Utabombeki, as well as our VC, our Vice Chancellor, our mother, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, and our VP Research, Siabonga, Prof. Prof. Tenjo Ameiwa, and all other dignitaries and office bearers of the university. Mine is not to start issuing the vote of thanks. I'm just really, really grateful to the organizers for this opportunity. But before I get all misty-eyed and I get all emotional, thanking you for this opportunity, let me hand over to Ms. Dudu Nkosi, Director, Information Resource Content Management at the UNISA Library and Information Services. Over to you, Ms. Dudu Nkosi. A round of applause for her, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. And I just want to say halala, halala UNISA Institutional Repository, halala. You know, in African, we make gestures with our hands when we are actually celebrating. So when we say halala, when we are sitting like this, it feels very funny. But I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude on behalf of our ED, and of course the acknowledgement of the protocol that already you've stipulated to Dr. Shandu. On behalf of the library ED, I would like to express our gratitude for your participation in the open access webinar of UNISA. It was an enlightening and engaging event, and your presence truly as an audience made it very successful. The webinar was aimed to shed light on the critical importance of open access in the realm of knowledge sharing, and I believe we have achieved that goal as a UNISA library. And first and foremost, I would like to extend our most profound appreciation to our distinguished speakers who shared their valuable insight and expertise with the audience and with the UNISA library and the African continent. Your contribution have been instrumental in deepening our understanding of open access and its impact on research, community, and access to information generally. Your thought-provoking presentations has inspired us to explore new knowledge creation and dissemination of information avenues. Our gratitude also goes to the library executive team for their guidance and for the organizing committee for their meticulous planning and execution of the event. The dedication and the hard work behind the scenes has ensured a seamless and enriching experience for all of us. And of course, none of this would have been possible without the esteemed audience, as I've mentioned before. In the audience, we have got people representation from Ghana, Kenya, Namibia, Nigeria, Botswana, Eswatini, and your participation have made the webinar truly vibrant and interactive. Your presence reflects your commitment to advancing open access. In conclusion, I would not be doing justice without actually appreciating our program director. Dr. Shandu, thank you. You've done a wonderful job. We really do appreciate you and the speakers and everybody. We are in Zulu. I don't know how to translate that into English. You are the academic in the English side. You'll assist with that. And I would like to also reiterate our sincere gratitude to each and every one of you as the audience that were in our auditorium, as we would call it, the virtual auditorium. We hope that the knowledge shared here will inspire you to continue advocating for open access and contribute to the growth of more inclusive and collaborative research, community, and publishing models. And one more request that we have is that we have shared with you a link for the survey that we would request you to complete on our behalf, and so that we can check how well we are doing, what would you like us to improve on, and complete it, and we will share it with some of the emails that have been shared with us so that we can get more information. And once again, thank you very much. We look forward to future opportunities and engagements with you. Thank you, Sebo. Thank you, Dr. Shandu.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to end this webinar. Again, ladies and gentlemen, and you may be surprised why I don't have my camera on. That's because I am preparing for a photo shoot. There is a message on the chat that would like to take a screenshot of all the attendees. And there is a request that we check our lipstick, check our headgear, check our jewelry, quickly go and, do whatever you need to do so that you will show yourself. I see that all the cameras have been enabled, almost. There we go. Then we will have our cameras enabled, which is exciting. And don't forget to complete the survey, please. Don't forget to complete the survey. Let's all switch on our cameras. I'm also switching mine on and fixing my ears. You know how my ears get sometimes. I'm fixing my glasses. And as we switch on our cameras, I need to tell this story about the library. The first time I took my children to the UNISA library, they stood there, they looked around, and they said it was a whole world of books. So thank you very much, UNISA Library, for bringing the world to everyone. Do we all have our cameras switched on? I hope so. As we are about to take these, I heard that we have representatives from across the world. I heard Nigeria, I heard Namibia. As we end this session, may I please humbly request that as we bid adieu, as we bid farewell, when you say goodbye from Nigeria, goodbye from Namibia, goodbye from Singapore, goodbye from Pretoria. Let's do that as we capture this moment. Again, thank you very much to the organizers behind the scenes. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. Mayor Darius, are you ready to take that snapshot? Will you count us down? Are you ready? Okay. 3, 2, 1. Halala! Bye, everyone. Don't forget to drop your goodbyes and your country. Bye. Halala, halala, halala.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Halala.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye from Pretoria.
Bye from Dubai.
Bye.
South Africa.
you.